Hello, I want to talk to you today about multimodal research and its pros and cons. Multimodal research may not be a term that's familiar to you, but you might be familiar with the term mixed methods research. Some decades ago, research was either quantitative or qualitative, and they never really met up or talked to each other. But gradually, some conversations must have taken place because people began to realise, a few people at first, began to realise that both methods had value. The first mixed methods researchers used both quantitative and qualitative data in the same research project, which was quite radical at the time. And through doing this, again, there was another gradual realisation that it wasn't just about mixing different types of data, but you could mix different methods of analysis, or different ways of setting research into context, or different methods of presenting research, and so on. So, this meant that even if research was purely quantitative or entirely qualitative, it could also be mixed methods. For example, a qualitative researcher could collect interview data, solely interview data, but then analyse it three different ways using three different methods, maybe discourse analysis, narrative analysis, and conversation analysis, to see whether those different methods produced similar findings or different findings and what that might tell them about answers to the research question. So it's begun to be called multimodal to reflect this complexity. And talking of complexity, where multimodal research is particularly useful is when you're trying to answer a particularly complex research question, the sort of question that is unlikely to be answered effectively by using one type of data or one analytic method or one theoretical lens. So to think about the pros and cons of multimodal research, the advantage is that it can help you answer these more complex questions, but there are also some disadvantages. Being multimodal requires more resources. If you're going to set your research into context in different ways or present it in different ways or use more data, clearly it's going to take more time, which may mean you'll need a bigger budget. And another thing is that multimodal research needs proper careful thought and planning. Sometimes I talk about the inverted bell curve of the research project. So at the start, you're at the top level, you've got an exciting new project to do, everything's lovely. And then as you go on, you come across more and more difficulties until you get to the really difficult, foggy bit of the analytical work where it feels like nothing will ever make sense. And then you claw your way up the other side and out to the top where you've finished your research project and everything's wonderful again. This is a very common experience. And what happens at the bottom of the bell curve, where everything's at the most difficult point, is that researchers often think, if I just do some more interviews, or if I just add a survey, or if I just do this, if I just throw in some more methods, it will all become clear. This is very rarely the case and generally really not a good idea. There are occasions where you do need to add methods in as you go, but that involves replanning, not as a reaction to difficulty, but as a reaction to changing in external circumstances that you didn't foresee, or something that's coming out of your data that you couldn't have predicted. So multimodal research needs really careful thought, really careful planning, but when it's well thought through and well planned, it can be very effective in answering those really complex research questions.